Commission to order tonight at 7 p.m. 6 p.m.
Move the clocks forward yet.
It feels like we moved the clocks forward. Madam Secretary, can I get a roll call?
Commissioner Kramer?
Here.
Commissioner Nicolai?
Here.
Commissioner Fritzos?
Here.
Commissioner Rossi?
Here.
Commissioner Reed?
Here.
Commissioner Rodriguez-Elkins?
Here.
Commissioner Sperber?
Here.
Assistant City Attorney Brandon Sindall?
Here.
Assistant Community Services Director Jim Wendell?
Here.
And
All right. Brandon, can you lead us in the pledge?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. I'll open it up to public comment. Does anybody have any public comment at this particular time? And it can be about anything. I see none. I will close public comment. Can I get approval of the agenda? Oops.
We're all trying.
Disappeared.
Oh, there it goes.
There we go.
There we go.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the agenda as submitted.
And I seconded that motion.
Commissioners, do we have any discussion? Nope. All right, we got a move by Commissioner Kramer, a second by Commissioner Reed. Please vote.
Aye.
Oh, yeah, you're not
My
on.
screen is not currently.
He has no active agenda
Oh.
items.
All right. The motion approved. All right, can I get a motion to approve of the minutes? All right, we got a move, we got a motion, we got a second. Commissioners, do we have any discussions on the minutes?
Yeah, can we do a verbal?
Yes.
motion, please?
I move to approve the minutes of the Planning Commission study session held on Tuesday, August 13th, 2024, and the Planning Commission meeting held on Thursday, August 15th, 2024.
I second that motion.
All right, we got a motion by Commissioner Elkins and a second by Commissioner Kramer. Please vote.
Aye.
Mine, oh, there we go. All right, motion passes. Thank you. All right, we're going to general business. We're going to consider, discuss, and possible adoption of resolution number 241 commending John Erickson for many years of service with the city of Sparks. And John, would you like to say anything?
Chair, if I could read the resolution.
You got it.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, we have resolution, as you introduced, number 241, introduced by the Sparks Planning Commission to recognize the contributions of John Erickson. Whereas John Erickson began his career with the city of Sparks on June 6, 2003, and served for over 21 years. And whereas John Erickson served as city engineer, transportation manager, and civil engineer too. Whereas John Erickson represented Sparks on several monumental projects, including but not limited to the Regional Road Impact Fee System with RTC, the Southeast Connector with Veterans Parkway, and the Impact Fee System for North Sparks. Whereas John Erickson has unselfishly committed his time and knowledge to making significant contributions to engineering and community development in the city of Sparks during his tenure as a member of Sparks staff. And whereas John Erickson has attended hundreds of public hearings, workshops, and study sessions during his tenure at Sparks. And whereas John Erickson participated in the Sparks Comprehensive Plan, overhaul of the zoning code, and was instrumental in the development of Victorian Square, the Sparks Marina, and the Northern Sparks Sphere of Influence. Whereas John Erickson was always available as a mentor, sharing his experience and knowledge. And whereas John Erickson has approached each staff member as an equal, was genuine, honest, and promoted candor. And whereas in retirement, John will have more time to dedicate to hunting for ducks throughout northern Nevada and watching Nevada basketball.
Yay.
There we go.
Whereas the Sparks Planning Commission hereby recognizes John Erickson for his faithful service to the community and his dedication to the city of Sparks. Now therefore it be resolved that the Sparks Planning Commission acknowledges and sincerely appreciates the invaluable contributions that John Erickson has made to the city of Sparks during his tenure. Hopefully passed if the Planning Commission does so on this 19th day of September by the Sparks Planning Commission. Thank you, Chair.
Bet. So let's go to motions. I will take a motion for approval.
Mr. Chair, I move to adopt resolution number 241, a resolution commending John Erickson for his many years of service with the city of Sparks. Congratulations,
second.
John.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thank you for your service.
Got a motion by Commissioner Kramer and a second by Commissioner Pritzo and all the other commissioners on board, and we just thank you for your service, John. The motion passes. And would you like to say anything?
Yes, I would. Thank you, Commissioner. It's been a great privilege to work for the city of Sparks. I mean, it's a great family, and it was a great 21 years working for the city of Sparks. I've got my family here. I've got my wife, Lisa, my daughter, Grace, and her boyfriend, Duncan, and then Cooper. And no, Gracie is a civil engineer that works for Wood Rogers, and my son is going to be graduating from Nevada, with a mechanical engineering degree in December. So the apple didn't fall too far from the tree, and it's been a great time working for the city of Sparks. I've been honored to work for you folks as well as the city council. It's just time for my wife and I to take a little time for ourselves to do a little traveling and watch our kids grow in their professions. And again, I thank you very much for this recognition. Again, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, John, I got one thing. If you want to get back to work, I got a spot at Engine 8, $2 an hour.
Does that go with the $2 check?
I'll consider it here in about 8 months, 9 months after duck season's over.
Very good. Come on up for a photo.
Okay, thank you. Come on, everybody's coming up.
But I have the whole family.
How to embarrass everybody.
Yeah.
Where do you want the photo, Jim?
Up here in front of the logo.
You're in it.
All right, well, once I'll get back.
You got this, Scott? Yeah. This guy, Michael, you want me to take it? You be in there? Come on, Gene.
Yeah, you can stand in front.
This guy's squeezing closer to that.
Come on, Kim.
Hold on, we got one more.
Gotta get closer.
Just a little bit.
Squeeze in.
Okay. Prone pose. All right, good deal.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I hope you'll see me.
John didn't smile. How can you tell?
Thank you, Shelley.
Oh, you're welcome. Congratulations.
Now the fun begins.
Thank you. Tell your dad hello for me.
I will. I'll let him know what happened tonight.
Yeah.
All right, we're back into business. Oh, the last result passed. So we need to get it off our, oh, there we go. All right. So general business, public hearing item, PCN 03061/CU24-0010.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. For the record, Scott Carey, Senior Planner. Tonight for the commission's review and consideration is a conditional use permit request to allow for outdoor storage and the construction of up to 10 additional tanks for the distribution, manufacturing, and storage of hazardous materials. Just to point out, Mr. Chairman, from a procedural standpoint, because this is a hazardous materials conditional use permit, the Planning Commission will be in a recommending body capacity to the City Council on this request. The subject site is located over on Larkin Circle. It's outlined here in red. There is quite an extensive land use entitlement history involving hazardous materials at this subject site. In 1989, the City Council approved a special use permit for Sierra Chemical Company to allow for an office, warehouse, and supporting storage and distribution of hazardous materials at this location. Between 1990 and 1993, there were several amendments to this special use permit that were reviewed and processed by the city. In 2003, the City Council approved an amendment to the 1989 special use permit. The intent of this special use permit at the time was to clean up the site and to address public safety and planning issues at the site. A copy of the full history is outlined in Exhibit 5 of the staff report. Today, the facility manufactures, stores, and distributes chemicals for use throughout the region. There are currently 4 storage tanks on the site that have a capacity of roughly 32,000 gallons. The majority of the hazardous materials arrive on the site via rail or by truck, and where they are then broken down and repackaged at this facility and are delivered for use throughout the region for many industrial processes. Throughout its history, staff will note that there have been several incidents involving hazardous materials on this site. The full history of these are outlined in the staff report. Staff will make a quick note of, in 2021, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, conducted an inspection of the facility and determined that a violation of possible violations regarding the operations. As a result of this inspection, EPA and Thatcher Chemical of Nevada reached a settlement, and a copy of the full press release outlining that settlement and the determination is included as Exhibit 6. Except for this incident in 2021, to staff's knowledge, the subject site has been operating in compliance with the applicant, in compliance with all federal, state, and local regulations, and has maintained a positive working relationship with the city since 2017. The request in front of the commission tonight is seeking to amend the 2003 special use permit to allow for the addition of up to 10 additional tanks ranging in size from 13,500 to 25,000 gallons in size for on-site storage of hazardous materials. In total, the applicant is requesting to increase the on-site storage capacity from 31,950 gallons to a total of 230,250 gallons of hazardous materials. Pursuant to state law, the quantities and concentrations of these materials proposed on the site qualifies as hazardous materials, thus triggering this major conditional use permit request in front of the commission tonight. We'll note that the subject site is located in the industrial zoning district. Under the municipal code, hazardous materials are allowed in the industrial zoning district with the approval of a conditional use permit. The applicant is seeking to allow for a total of 10 construction tanks. And they're looking at 4 general phases of construction. Phase 1 is outlined here in orange. And this would include the construction of 2 21,000-gallon tanks that would be used to store 21,000 gallons of sulfuric acid. I will note for the record, Mr. Chairman, there was an error on page 8 of the staff report in that phase 2 was incorrectly stated these would be 25,000-gallon tanks for a total capacity of 50,000 in phase 1. It's 2 21,000-gallon tanks for a total of 42,000 gallons in this phase. Phase 2 is outlined here in yellow. That would include the construction of 2 25,000-gallon tanks that would be used to store 25,000-gallon tanks or 25,000 gallons of ferric chloride, and another tank, 25,000-gallon tank that would hold aluminum sulfate. Phase 3 is outlined here in blue. That would include the construction of 4 25,000-gallon tanks that would be used to store polyaniline chloride, aluminum chloral hydrate, and hydrochloric acid. Phase 4 is outlined here in green. That would include the construction of up to 2 13,500-gallon tanks that would be used to store hydrogen peroxide. Each tank, as proposed with this request, would be constructed within a secondary containment berm. These berms are designed and sized to accommodate no less than the contents of the largest tank, plus the volume of water that would fall during a 24-hour, 25-year storm event. There were 2 issues staff carefully analyzed with this request. The first item is public safety. Obviously, due to the nature of the proposed facility, it operates under significant safety and security review by federal, state, and local standards. The facility maintains its own emergency response program with routine safety inspections and drills to ensure that everything's operating safely. The applicant, Thatcher Chemical, obtains annual permits from Sparks Fire Department related to fire alarms and sprinklers that are on the site. In addition, the facility is also subject to the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, their Sensitive Security Information Protocol. At the state level, the facility is required by the Nevada State Fire Marshal to obtain an annual combined agency hazmat facility report. Purpose of this report is to document the quantities and the concentrations of the materials on site so that it can be distributed to federal, state, and local emergency responders and other regulatory agencies. During this review process, at the request of the Sparks Fire Department, the applicant did perform a third-party safety review. A copy of that third-party safety review is included in Exhibit 9 of the staff report. This third-party review found that overall the facility is generally compliant with the International Fire Code, and that all the fire protection systems are in good working order. The report did recommend 14 recommendations to improve safety on the site. Proposed condition of number 6 reflects these recommendations and requires that all of those recommendations are fully implemented before the issuance of any building permit. The other issue involving the staff carefully analyzed with this request is access to the site. Vehicle access to the site is from Larkin Circle, and vehicle access to the rear of the site is through a security gate. And that security gate handles all the deliveries entering and exiting the site, and they're required to have an entry badge and code to enter and open the gate. Fundamentally, this proposal will fundamentally shift the nature of the transportation and access of the materials on the site from the totes and barrels that you see here into permanent on-site storage tanks. So there are 6 findings that the commission is being asked to make this evening. The first 5 are the standard conditional use permit findings, and then there's additional findings that are required by state law. Finding C1 is compliance with the comprehensive plan. The site has been designated with an industrial land use since the 1976 master plan by the city. The current comprehensive plan land use designation for this site is industrial. Staff believes that the proposed project will support goals MG3 and MG15 by encouraging products to be transported to the site via rail. The subject site is adjacent to an existing Union Pacific rail spur, and staff finds that the proposed tanks are compatible with this existing railroad facility. Staff believes that the requested additional storage tanks and the outdoor storage as part of it will encourage further investment that will help maintain the area south of Interstate 80 for industrial use in support of policy MG2. Permitting additional on-site storage capacity will advance goal EV1 that aims to grow and diversify the city's economy by allowing for additional products to be shipped from this location and used throughout the region for industrial purposes. The subject site is located in a developed area of Sparks where city services can be provided and at acceptable levels, including the Sparks Fire Service, in support of policy CF1. Finding C2 is compatibility with adjacent uses. To the south, east, and west of the subject site are developed industrial uses. To the north of the subject site is the Union Pacific Main Line, also an existing rail facility. Further to the north across Interstate 80 is a site in the Copper Canyon Plan development that has a land use designation of tourist commercial. The project is designed to comply with all federal, state, and local laws and standards governing the storage and distribution of hazardous materials. As outlined in the proposed condition of approval, the applicant will be required to submit and obtain to the fire department an emergency action plan, which includes an evacuation procedure and shelter-in-place mechanisms in the instance of an incident. Staff believes that through the enforcement of the federal, state, and local standards and the proposed conditions of approval, that adequate protections are in place to protect adjacent properties. Therefore, staff believes it can make finding C2. Finding C3 is the potential impairment of natural resources. As you can see from this picture, the Truckee River is located about 900 feet to the east. This is a critical water source for our entire region. In addition to that, there is a section of the flood zone AE that's been designated by FEMA. These are areas that are at high risk to flood because of its proximity to floodplains and rivers. Each of the 10 proposed storage tanks will be required to have a secondary containment area, and they will be designed to have its top walls that are outside of the base flood elevation. Proposed, as you can see, the flood zone is in this blue hatching right here. There's a small portion that covers the phase 1. Condition of approval number 9 requires that all tanks and associated improvements be located 1 foot above the base flood elevation on this site. In addition, proposed condition number 7 requires the applicant to develop an emergency action plan that includes safety procedures for a flood event. This condition also requires procedures to include language to mitigate the impacts of floating vessels during a flood event and to avoid contamination of the Truckee River watershed during a flood. Finding C4 is conditioned to address identified impacts. The first key area that staff has tried to design in the proposed conditions of approval are public safety. Proposed condition of approval number 5 requires the applicant to provide a 24-hour project contact to the fire department, police department, and community services department throughout the life of the project. Proposed condition of number 6 requires the applicant to comply with all requirements of the Sparks Fire Department, including the submission of a site security plan that limits public access to the site, develop a procedure for the routine maintenance of the facility, and providing the contact information for the the on-site security officer. Also included in condition of approval number 6 is the requirement for the applicant to complete all 14 of the recommendations of the third-party safety review. Proposed condition number 7 requires the applicant to submit for review to the fire chief an emergency action plan. The proposed condition requires the plan to have the following: mitigation strategies for flood and fire events, an evacuation and shelter-in-place order for the site as well as for surrounding businesses, response protocols for the explosion and spills on the site, an air plume analysis for maximum release of the materials on site, and a spill control plan to prevent materials from draining off the site. Proposed condition of approval number 8 requires the applicant to develop and maintain an emergency response procedure for the safe handling of all hazardous materials on the site. This condition requires the applicant to ensure that spill kits are available and on the site throughout the duration of the project. This condition also requires the applicant to plan for and regularly conduct safety drills and training exercises in conjunction with emergency response agencies as well as surrounding businesses. The other item to highlight in the proposed conditions of approval is the expiration date. According to the applicant, the timing and phasing of this project can be anywhere from 2 to 10 years because of the market-driven nature of the chemicals that are involved here. Conditional use permits are not meant to be left open-ended, and to avoid this, the Sparks Municipal Code establishes a 2-year time frame to establish the proposed use. If any phase or proposed condition of approval, number 2, outlines that the applicant will have 2 years to construct all 10 of the tanks. Any tanks that are not completed during this timeline will require a subsequent conditional use permit. Basically, the intent here is that they have 2 years to complete all of the required tanks. The other conditions that we were looking at was parking. Here's some shots of the facility. In the front of the lot, the site is currently deficient of one required ADA space. There's one on the site. The code requires 2. So proposed condition of approval number 10 requires the applicant to install an additional ADA space. Also on the site, you can see from this picture, there is mature landscaping on the site. Proposed condition of approval 8 requires the applicant to provide a landscaping plan that documents this existing landscape, and proposed condition of approval 9 requires that this landscaping be maintained throughout the life of the project. Finding C5 is public notice. With conditional use permits involving hazardous materials, there are enhanced notification requirements in state law. Public notice of this hearing tonight was published in the Reno Gazette-Journal on August 19th. In addition, 75 notices were mailed to owners of property and tenants of property within 1,000 feet of the subject site. Additionally, state law requires enhanced notification and outreach to the following: the Citizens Advisory Board, the Administrator of the Nevada Division of Environmental Protection, the Nevada State Fire Marshal, and the Administrator of the Nevada Division of Industrial Relations. In addition, notification was sent out to other local governments in the region as well as military installations. To date, staff has received a total of 5 public comments. There were 4 that were highlighted at the Planning Commission. I will note on your desk today is an additional public comment that was provided from Mr. Brad Spencer that he requested to have be part of the record. The last finding that the Planning Commission was being requested to make is with respect to NRS 278-147. There are 2 major components of this finding. The first part is that the health and safety and the residents of the city. The proposed 10 storage tanks are designed to comply with all federal, state, and local laws governing the storage and handling of materials. In addition, the project must comply with all the conditions of approval associated with this request, as well as address all of the third-party safety recommendations. As designed and conditioned, this conditional use permit request is not anticipated to adversely affect the health and safety of the residents. The second part of this required condition is, or finding, is the safety and security of any military installations on the site. State law requires that all military installations within 3,000 square feet of the subject site be notified and conduct outreach with. The nearest military installation is the Nevada Air National Guard facility at the Reno Tahoe International Airport. It's well outside the 3,000, but we reached out to the Nevada Air National Guard as well as the Nevada National Guard, and we did not receive any objections to the proposed request, and so therefore we believe that this will not have a negative impact on military installations. Before I wrap this up, Mr. Chairman, I just want to point out, as I mentioned in the study session, there was some slight adjustments staff would like to make with respect to the proposed conditions of approval. Exhibit 3, page 2 is where we're kind of looking. There's a copy provided on your desk there, but for the record, we would like to add a formatting change on condition of approval 6E to just make it formatted so that we can properly cite it. But with respect to proposed condition number 7 with the fire department emergency action plan, number F, we would like to add applicable hazardous materials on the site. That's the condition that requires an air plume analysis to be provided, and so adding the word applicable we think would help beef up that proposed condition. Overall, staff believes that from a land use planning perspective, the proposed additional tanks and increased quantities of materials is an appropriate use at this location. With the proposed condition of approval and operating agreements, staff believes that all of the required findings can be met and is recommending approval of this request. Mr. Chairman, we do have our Fire Marshal, Patrick Chu, here. He does have a quick presentation, and the applicant has a presentation as well. But at this point, if it's okay with you, I could take a pause and answer any questions if there are for me.
Sure. Commissioners, do we have any? We do.
I have one question, and in regards to your outreach with the Nevada Department of Environmental Protection and the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, did they express any concerns with the proximity to the Truckee River and in general, any concerns with natural resources in the area?
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Reed. I did have the opportunity to meet with Director Settlemyer of the Department of Conservation and Jennifer Carr with the Nevada Division of Environmental Protection in Carson City. I did get the chance to work pretty closely with the state's chemical program, and we did walk the site with them. One of the things that we've learned as part of this outreach with the state is that this proposal does not meet the thresholds for the CAP program. It's Chemical Accident Prevention Program. My brain caught up finally. And it doesn't meet the thresholds for their review. However, when walking the site with them, they did point out some stuff that we tried to incorporate into these proposed conditions of approval. And they did not object to the proximity to the river.
Thank you.
More questions, commissioners, for Scott?
Okay, I'll turn it over to Fire Marshal Chu.
Okay, so, all right. Planning Commissioner Rawson, commissioners, my name is Patrick Chu. For the record, I'm the Fire Marshal for the City of Sparks. I first want to apologize for not attending the study session on Tuesday. I just had prior commitments and I couldn't be there. So everything that Scott said is pretty accurate and consistent. I mentioned this to Thatcher and them that this is, we have to respect these chemicals. There's a reason why these chemicals, percentage-wise, is selected on which they're going to be stored here, and the state is not going to inspect that because they're slightly below the threshold of a state requirement. So, which is one of the reasons why I would suggest and recommend having a third-party independent party come and do the inspections. So we talked about that too. That's up to you if you want to recommend that. Since the state is not going to be doing the inspections, other facilities in other states, they do have frequency of inspections of this type of facility. So first of all, these quantities here that Scott has mentioned and these products here, sodium hydrochloride, that is obviously something we got to respect, right? It's very toxic. Any of these products they have here can do some harm if you were to actually physically make contact with that with your skin and so forth. The concern I mentioned to them that I see is not really the fact that they're storing these products here and the dike, everything is fine. The concern I have, and there's been a couple of incidents in the past 20 years when the distribution of these rail cards come into play and they're accidentally mixed. That's when you get what we call chlorine gas. And if you get chlorine gas to a level in which again, this is like kind of like a very rare occasion that probably would never happen, but if it does happen, so I like to focus on training and preventive maintenance and continue training. And just like if you were to own a firearm, you got to respect that, right? You got to respect these chemicals. You got to respect the fact that if these things are mixed, you can get to a degree where you can have pulmonary edema, if you know what that is. At about 500 parts per million, you start getting liquid in your lungs, and that's not good. And within a matter of 30 minutes or so, it's also not that good. And then once you get higher level of this, it really is very fatal. But the past incidents that they had has nothing to do with Thatcher. So the good news is all the mixing they've done in the past, they're not doing any of those. So the training of this, for me, is critical. Having their staff continue to get recertified and certified and having somebody come there to evaluate these, their training procedure and their safety procedures and make sure they're continuing to not get lax on that. This is a rare incident if it does happen, but and they know about it. I mean, if you look in the Chlorine Institute there, go to their website, they have a couple of incidents that happened 20 years ago in Kansas, one in Canada that happened, and you can get to a level where it's not good. And if you see any green smoke coming out of the ground, that's if they mix, then my suggestion is to run. Again, that's a very rarity if it's going to happen. So, and the past incidents, it's not as a result of what Thatcher's doing, it's the previous owner.
Okay.
All that thing is taken care of. So these dikes are great. If they have a spill, they're falling the dikes, great. My concern if these chemicals were to mix, that's my biggest concern. So preventive maintenance training is a big thing that I would like to see in place here in addition to. So the state is not even going to do inspections here. It's under the threshold for inspection, which is the reason why they picked the percentage-wise of the chemical where they're being stored here. I don't know, I can speak for hours on some of these chemicals and what they do. I do have a couple of slides here. So the sodium hydrochloride, like they have here, it's fine, but now they got sulfuric acid. Now, if you mix those two together, correct me if I'm wrong, Derek, but that's not good, right? Oh, yeah, it's not good. Most of these products, if they were to mix, it will create what we call this plume. And once you get to a level where you get pulmonary edema, it's not good. You're going to get liquid in your lungs, and that's going to be hard to remove that. So, and everybody has this kind of stuff around your house, right? So you take a look at this, and you take a look at the level of sodium hydrochloride, it's not even 3%. Even at 3%, when it touches your hand, you kind of want to wash it. It's hard to wash off, right? Imagine if it's at 20 or 30%. Does that make sense? I mean, I'm trying to dumb it down a little bit. So here is some of the concerns if they were to mix, which again, I don't see this happening as long as they take this very serious. No different than if you have a firearm. Take it very serious. Training, retraining, recertification. Somebody got to stay on top of it. This is what the safety officer is all about. And we talked about that, and they seem like they're obviously very concerned as well. This is kind of a good problem to have here in Sparks, to be perfectly honest, because We have industry here that need these products. Everything from our treatment plant to the water sewer treatment plant to the military to companies that make chips. They all use these products. So this is really a if you will, a good problem to have, and they're meeting the demand of industry. But you can see here some of the levels of what you can get, and it's not good. Again, not saying it's going to happen. If and I mentioned to them, in a perfect world, Apollo 13 would not explode in the air. But that did happen, right? So the best we can do is stay on top of this jointly with the fire department and the city. The state's not going to be involved because it's not at the threshold where they're going to be doing inspections on. And we'll get a third-party private independent company to do some sort of check on their safety procedure. And and one thing we discussed was in other state and EPA in general, it's not every year, it's potentially every 3 years, they will come out and do a assessment of their safety procedure. And if that's something's recommended, I think that would be a good thing for both the city and for Thatcher. Let's see, what else I got here? I'm just gonna do a little nerdy stuff here, but exothermal reaction is the reason why you hear about these batteries, right? They get hot and they start thermal reaction and you can't stop it. You got metals on one side, you got gas on the inside. That's the reason why they're on the opposite end of the periodic table. And this is what we got here is some of these chemicals were to interact. So signage, training, that's paramount in my opinion. I think that's all I got.
All right. Commissioners, do you have any questions for the fire marshal?
I think it's more for Scott
Yeah,
related to
yeah,
what
I
he's
think so,
saying.
too.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Yep, sure.
All right, we have questions for Scott.
Request to speak?
Yeah, you can speak. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry. I didn't say yes. Scott, and thank you, Patrick, and thank you for your call the other day, too. I appreciate that. And so on the conditions of approval, I don't see specifically training or the occasional third-party inspections. I see the evacuation plans and safety procedures, unless it's incorporated within the safety procedures. I wasn't sure if it needed to be specifically outlined.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Rodriguez Elkins. I believe the requirements for the
Training and third-party inspections.
thank you. The training would be covered in the condition of approval number 7. That would be part of the action plan.
Okay,
If you'd like, we can certainly modify any of these conditions of
Yeah.
approval or add to it. The intent is that the training requirements and the maintenance plans would be to Mr. Chu's desk before we issue any building permits.
okay. Okay, thank you.
Any more questions? Yes.
If I may, Scott, on condition of approval 8, the second half of it, and I think this is on safety drills, says the applicant shall develop an annual emergency action plan to the approval of the fire marshal and regularly conduct safety drills. So it leaves that up to, I think, a later approval to fire marshal choose discretion.
Okay, thank you.
Question
Okay, Commissioner Kramer?
to Commissioner Rodriguez Elkins. I do not see anything on here under anywhere. Yes, I do, under condition 6,
For the air release?
for condition 6, the fire department submit a site procedure and policy that allows for routine safety inspections. So does that mean the fire department is going to routinely inspect? Because the way I get it, is that, am I correct? Is that the fire department is going to routinely inspect this site?
Yeah, we have been, it's just not to the level of a chemist, if you will. Our inspector's been there for the last 5 years. They look at fire systems, exit signs, but not to the level of what a chemist would look for if the safety procedure, plume analysis, that kind of stuff, they're not.
So you're looking for fire violations?
Yes.
Is that correct? Typical fire violations?
Yes.
So when you say third-party safety you're looking for third-party independent inspection, you are looking for a chemist, a higher level of inspection? Is that what you're saying?
Somebody would have a more esoteric knowledge of
Chemicals?
chemical stuff and
Okay.
the safety procedures and are familiar with facilities such as this.
Okay. So is that something that can be built into the conditions of approval, like on a 3-year
Yes.
process? I mean, I'm thinking that might be something that maybe would ease the angst and anxiety of the neighbors. Just, if I was a neighbor, I'd be thinking that, at least they're gonna have a safety inspection once every 3 years. Maybe not every year, but at least every 3 years, you're gonna know that they're gonna have a very thorough inspection of their facility to know that it's not gonna go boom.
Well, it's probably not going to go boom, but you're going to see a big orange gas
Right,
coming out.
you're gonna know that I think I would, I think that that condition of approval should be added. Maybe under fire department? I'm not sure where it would be added, though.
Commissioner Kramer, I think, what I'm hearing is, and it might fit in condition of approval 6B.
That's kind of what I'm thinking, is
And maybe we add,
6.
maybe what I'm hearing you're suggesting is that we add maybe a 3-year, every 3 years.
Every 3 years, that there
the
is a
Sparks Fire
third-party
Department.
independent inspection of
Okay.
the site?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I just want to remind the planning commission, we haven't heard from the applicant or the public hearing, which may modify the way you want to go with the
Understood.
condition.
Understood? So let's hold that and hold that thought, and let's hear from the applicant as well, I guess.
The other thing is training.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. For the record, my name is Dave Snellgrove. I'm planning manager with CFA Bowman. I've been working with Thatcher. I do want to start out our presentation in terms of thanking Scott. We came in, through my 34 years of doing this, this is the third hazardous materials ones. These are kind of rare. They're very cumbersome to go through. I know that there's additional and different information that's typically required that isn't on your standard checklist for a conditional use permit. So we came in early and talked to Scott about this. He'd had some conversations with Thatcher when they were going in for their building permit, and they said, oh, no, you're going to need to get a conditional use permit. They were going for 1 tank at the time. We have requested this for 10 tanks. It's practically infeasible for us to be able to, for them to be able to put 10 tanks up in in 2 years, and then if we can get a 1-year extension. So I'll just start by identifying that, and I'll go through our presentation. Some of it'll cover similar information to what Scott had, but I'll try not to be too duplicative. With me in the audience tonight and sitting here next to me is Derek Chandler, who's the project manager I've been working with, Scott's been working with very closely. We also have Jane Rogers, who's general manager with Thatcher, and we also have Sean Holland, who's a safety inspector who works both in Reno and in Sacramento. This is Thatcher's business. This is what they do. They deal with chemicals. They know what chemicals react and what chemicals don't react with one another. So as I'm going through this, I'll try and point out, and Derek can probably educate me on some things because he can talk a lot better about this than I can, in terms of some of the things in terms of our containment areas. So the whole site's a 5.03 acre site. Thatcher takes up about half of that site. They're in Suite B on this property. This has been a hazardous material site for over 30 years, since 1990. So this isn't something new that's happening. We're asking for basically a different storage mechanism. Thatcher started operating on the site in 2017. There were Sierra Chemical, I've lived here long enough, I know the name of Sierra Chemical, and there's been some checkered past with Sierra Chemical. During the time that Thatcher's been there, they did have one violation, and Derek will cover that in his portion of the presentation. It was not spill-oriented, it wasn't an event, it was something with reporting in the EPA that they had to deal with. So we are asking for a major conditional use permit for outdoor storage and the construction of up to 10 permanent tanks. Right now, they store things on site in mobile totes, which I'll have pictures of, and barrels. And this would convert over to tanks. We do have the Union Pacific Railroad line, which runs to the north of us, running east and west, and there's a rail spur that comes into the site. That's what makes this site and the proposed use of the tanks really ideal. It takes advantage of the use of the rail spur rather than continuing to bring everything in by truck, or the majority of stuff by truck. They can convert over to the rail, which is a safer mechanism, rather than sending things on whichever. Arguably, they're going to be on major arterial and highways and things like that. You're not going to be going down any of the local roads, but on a myriad of different streets. And the rail is a safer option for travel and transport of such materials. So this is the site itself. It's broken into 3 different users. The purple is Thatcher's use area. Patriot does have trucks parked outside of there and around their building. They take up the western portion of the building of Thatcher's, and then you also have Shine Master Truck Repair over on the far western side of the site. The rear area, Scott mentioned that that's secured by an access gate. There is security top treatment to the fencing. This is a secured rear yard area, and you need to have appropriate passcode and clearance to get into the site. The property is zoned and master plan as industrial. It has been. Scott mentioned the zoning's been on the site since 1976. This type of use, along with many other industrial uses, but hazardous materials are an allowed use within the industrial zoning with approval of a conditional use permit, which process we're going through right now. So looking at the existing site, a couple of the conditions, I think, can't remember which numbers they were, but there are a couple of conditions that address landscaping. It was in a little bit of a weedy condition when we started working on it. During that time, the landlord has started cleaning that up, so that is improving as we go. They do have mature landscaping. There is good sized trees on the site. The number of trees that they do have on the site meets the number required, but we'll make sure that everything's hunky-dory with staff as part of the conditions. The proposed tank storage area, this really gets into kind of the crux of, over on the right-hand side, up in the top right-hand corner, that is the first containment area. Now, keep in mind, these containment areas are set up such that they don't have a drain out. As mentioned in Scott's presentation, I'll reiterate that the size of these containment areas is sized to hold the volume of one of the largest tank that's in there, plus 24 hours at a 25-year storm event rainfall. So, and this is the one that has the little nips the corner of the floodplain area. It has to be situated at least 1 foot above base flood elevation. That's with the top elevation of this tank, of this containment area. So you can see in this bottom left-hand corner, there's two two discs in here. That is where 2 tanks would be. This one, which one was this? Was this hydrochloric?
Sulfuric acid.
This is the sulfuric acid. Now, bottom right-hand corner, that tank that's sitting there, that's not in a containment area. The reason that's not in a containment area, that's the tank that they're waiting to get their approval so they can put it into this containment area. But that is what a 21,000 gallon tank looks like, just so you know, for reference. You have some height of the building and some of the mobile totes around that they give you a little bit better frame of reference. Up here in the left-hand corner, these are the totes, and you can see some barrels. All these materials are currently being stored on site. They're just not in a tank with a containment area. So what we're trying to do is get these materials. They could store a larger volume at the end of the day on this, but that allows for growth within the demands that they have in their market to take hold. They're not going to be able to build all 10 tanks. They might get through 1, 2, 3 in a 2-year, 3-year time frame. We had originally asked for 10 years, and that kind of got whittled back, and we're at the standard right now. I will make a little statement about maybe this is meritorious of a little bit longer approval, but we'd rather have an approval than argue about timeframes. I'll be perfectly honest with you. So you can see this site down in the bottom left-hand corner. Our first tank, and this will become a little clearer as I get some of our colored phasing maps up next. Everything to the west of this is where our future containment areas are going to be. So replacing these mobile tote areas with containment areas and permanent tanks that can serve directly off of this rail spur rather than having trucks bring them in and then moving and hauling the totes around. That's, in a nutshell, an easy version of what we're looking at on the site. So the outdoor storage areas, they have a myriad of different trucks, and obviously they have the mobile totes. So the site does have outdoor storage. When I looked at this with Scott, we couldn't really tell whether outdoor storage had been part of past approvals. So to be safe, we wanted to make sure that that was in fact included. So we did make sure that outdoor storage was a component part of this request. So the overall site plan, where our tank storage area, where the new tanks would be, is really up there in the brighter red circled area. The tank areas that we're looking at, sulfuric acid, hydrogen peroxide, hydrochloric acid, ferric chloride, aluminum sulfate, aluminum chlorohydrate, and polyaluminum chloride. I did reasonably well on going through this. I was surprised. Now, the way that they have these set up, and I think my next slide, one of my upcoming slides have that. They've set these up into different containment areas so that the different materials that they have, the sulfuric acid, all that's going to be initially in that containment area is sulfuric acid. And then what's the other? Is it hydrochloric acid? What's the one that gets married with it?
Ferric chloride.
Ferric
Derek
chloride.
Chandler for the record.
Yeah.
Ferric chloride and aluminum sulfate are compatible with sulfuric acid.
They're trying to make sure, this is the business that they're in, is dealing with these materials regularly. And Fire Marshal Chu brought up really good information that you don't want these things to mix. Well, that's been factored in as part of their containment areas and what tanks go where within the site. Go back and make sure there wasn't. So proposed would be the addition of 10 tanks. And in terms of the overall tank storage on the site, it would take us from 32,000 gallons to a maximum of 230,000 gallons. These tanks will not be constructed all at one time. Again, I'll repeat that if we get through 1, 2, or 3 in the approval time frame that is currently within the conditions, that's probably all we'd be able to do. And then we're back doing this again. I would hope that there is some latitude to maybe add a little bit more time so they can reasonably get through a little bit more without having to go through this very, very onerous process. But again, I'd rather have the approval than argue about timeframes. But if there is an appetite for that, I'd love to talk about it. Scott went through the flood zone area. This is a copy of the FEMA map. Down in the bottom left-hand corner is a blow-up of that area. Up where the white area is, where you get out of the flood zone AE, you can see this 4393. That's a base flood elevation. So when Scott says they have to build 1 foot over the base flood elevation, these areas in here in flood zone AE have a known base flood elevation, and in this area it's 4393. So this one really gets more to the different containment areas. So in phase one, right now, this berm, along with this dash portion, the berm itself has been constructed. The first tank will go in here, and then they'd have a second tank, and those are sulfuric acid. Thank you. In phase two, they'd end up taking out the western portion of that and then adding in a couple more tanks of materials that would not actively create a problem if there were a spill and they were to mix in any way, and those are ferric chloride?
Aluminum sulfate and ferric chloride.
Aluminum sulfate, ferric chloride. Then you have berm 5. Now, this is a different containment area here. This one has hydrochloric acid, PAC,
Yeah, polyaluminum chloride
and HCE.
and aluminum chlorhydrate.
See, I didn't do as well as he did in my chemistry class. So those materials within that containment area would not have a negative reaction with one another. And then the hydrogen peroxide area is over here in berm 6. If they were to be able to get through all 10, in all likelihood, they'll have to be back, and they may have to be back 2 or 3 times over the build out of this whole thing. This is all market driven in how they're trying to utilize what this site is set up for in rail access and to utilize it better. So, yeah, we had asked for 10 years. I'd be happy if we could have any kind of discussion about potential longer period, but this part I'll go ahead and turn over the last 3 slides to Derek.
Yeah, so as discussed, we are a chemical distributor for the region. We support a lot of different industries. With these chemicals, specifically ferric chloride, aluminum sulfate, aluminum chlorhydrate, and polyaluminum chloride, these are used as water treatment chemicals. They're coagulants and flocculants that help remove contaminants from either to purify water or to remove it in water treatment. Then hydrochloric acid, sulfuric acid, and hydrogen peroxide. These are used in manufacturing by a lot of the industry. They're also used in water treatment. And I mean, that's our main business is water treatment. That's a lot of what we do. We do have other stuff, but as you see, the stuff is all tied to that, and specifically with municipalities. I would like to talk just briefly on the 2021 violation claims with the EPA. This was, as mentioned before, not related to any sort of a release or an incident, injury incident. This was documentation related to our equipment and also some of our records. And we did settle this with the EPA and fully address that. This one. Being a hazardous material site, there are a lot of requirements and codes that we have to follow coming from the federal government, from state, and also local. We have been working with the fire department and want to continue that good relationship to ensure we're meeting all of the fire code. And as mentioned before, as part of that, we did recently have a fire evaluation that was positive. We got recommendations, and we're actively working to implement all of those recommendations. And as part of this application, we did include in it our emergency response program, our security policy and protocol. We also included in that our Tier 2 hazmat report and permit. That's filed, as mentioned before, through the state, and it's distributed throughout to all the different agencies from them. And we submit that every year. Okay, we can go to the next slide. And then, yeah, we just wanted to briefly mention the public comment letters that we have received. There's an additional one. These are the 4 that staff forwarded on to us. We did receive from, and I apologize if I say your name wrong, I do my absolute best, Don Franzia and Mark Mazer requested additional information regarding project details and safety measures. And all the applicable information was included in this permit application and is also in the exhibits for this meeting. John Phillips expressed concern that his business did not receive evacuation plans for the neighborhood in the event of a hazardous material event. And this was part of condition 8, was that we do provide a program to the fire marshal's approval, and that we do implement safety drills and training in conjunction with the fire department, the safety agencies, and with the surrounding businesses. Kathy Drake had a question and some concerns related to requirements for meeting safety standards, and wanting to know what materials are stored in the tanks. We did respond to that through the city staff, but I also invite if there's questions and further discussion wanted, I'd be happy to have that conversation.
We've worked closely with the city staff. There was one comment that came up earlier. I kind of leaned over and I think I heard the answer right, but there was talk about third-party inspection, so I'll let Derek answer that. Is that something that you would be very accepting of doing?
Yes, we discussed that with Pat Chu, and we would be very willing to do that. That helps us to make sure we're doing everything on ours. And to us, the most important thing is everyone goes home safe and alive at the end of the day. So yes, that's definitely something we would agree to.
In terms of all of the local, state, federal rules, regulations, third-party inspection, different things, they're very highly scrutinized business, and rightly so. What they're dealing with is something that could create a big problem. And Fire Marshal Chu mentioned that. They try and do everything. This is what their business is. They deal with these things regularly. It's in their best interest to deal with these in an appropriate, legal, professional, safe manner. So I think that between all the conditions of approval, additional inspections, the regulations that they do have to go under, kind of goes back to one of my themes is that we would certainly hope for a longer general approval time. Maybe it goes to 3 years plus a 1-year extension to allow them a little bit longer to go through. Otherwise, they'll be back in probably 3 years having to go through this exact same thing again with the concerns and consternation. The neighbors, anytime you hear hazardous materials, it's disconcerting. Again, keep in mind, this site's been operating with hazardous materials for over 30 years. So, the neighbors are here with concerns, but they've been working with hazardous materials under Sierra Chemical and with Thatcher for the past 7 years at this location for many, many years before. So with that, we're in agreement with the staff's assessment, review, and recommendations for the project. We're in agreement with the conditions as presented and amended by staff. And we believe, as does staff, that all the legal findings can be made and respectfully request your recommendation of approval. With that, we'll close our presentation and be available for any questions.
All right, thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Just sit tight for a sec. Commissioners, we have some questions for them.
I have one quick question,
Yes.
Mr. Chair. Okay, this is just kind of more of a logistics thing, but the estimation that you could get 3 or 4 of the tanks done maybe, does that include the one that's already built and just waiting to be installed, or would that be in addition to the one that's sitting there empty right now?
It's a great question, Commissioner Pristos. So currently, what started all this, we have a permit, an active permit trying to build 1 tank, and that would be the first thing that we would do. Once that was done, and it really depends on the market. If the market tells us, hey, there's a lot of growth potential in these different areas, the times ago now, it's hard to say how quick we'd go. In terms of just physically being able to do it, if we submitted all the building permits and stuff right at the beginning, then we could get some of them done. But it's largely going to be just, there's going to be time between when it's time to start them. And because of the permitting process and the design process, everything involved with this type of a project, it's a long time frame. Any one of these phases, I would estimate to be a 2 to 3 year process by itself.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, kind of related to that in terms of the timing on condition two, and I talked to Scott about this through the process. At the bottom of condition two, talks about, there's a 2-year time, this approval will become null and void as to the unconstructed phases, and new construction, new conditional use permit will be required to construct and establish any unpermitted, unconstructed, and unestablished phases. So I talked to Scott about if we'd gone through the building permit and we were ready, but the time frame ran out, if they had an approved building permit, we would certainly hope that they can still act on that building permit. The language in this, and I know a lot of this comes right out of code, the language in this is a little bit hard and fast that, oh, no, you got your building permit, but I'm sorry, you got to go back through the conditional use permit now because you didn't get it installed in time. It's something to consider. So I did want to put it on the record that is disconcerting to us, that if we've gone through all the hoops and hurdles on getting the approvals and then they run out of time, they don't have it fully established, they'd hate to be held up on that.
More questions for the applicant?
I do.
Okay, Commissioner Elkins?
Thank you. It was a great presentation. So I just wanted a little bit of clarification to make sure I understand. And so this is a multi-tenant parcel? And I had not understood that before until now. And so is there secure access between the other two tenants and Thatcher?
There is controlled access inside the warehouse portion. On the outside, the access is only through the perimeter. There isn't currently anything separating the two outside areas.
Okay, and so they're tenants who have all known and worked with each other for a long time, and there's no security concerns about the other tenants, that kind of thing? I mean, if they have access to the grounds where the chemicals are stored.
We've had no issues in the past or any previous incidents with it.
Okay, all right, and so then the other thing was, how is the product distributed once it's inside of the tank? If you have multiple clients, how do you get it to the client, to the client?
Excellent question. So from the tank, we then package it into either, it may go to a tank trailer if they're buying larger quantities, or it may be repackaged into a bulk container, IBC, or a drum. And that part of that process is there's piping in place and controls, engineering controls and procedures to ensure that it's done all within containment. So if there is any leaks, any incidents, they can be addressed immediately. They're contained, they can't escape. So
Perfect, that's what I needed. And then the last thing, to clarify the training, and I did see it there on 8, so thank you. Because I was a little bit confused thinking that people who have been in business for a long time dealing with chemicals needed to be trained in the chemicals. And that's where I thought the emphasis was, as opposed to the, on handling, as opposed to the drills and training exercises for not only the staff of Thatcher, but co-tenants and neighbors. So, okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Commissioners, any more questions for the applicant? Okay, I do have one, since you guys did bring it up on your safety plan, evacuation plan. Are you going to hand those out to the neighbors?
I believe the plan was to share the evacuation plan, the emergency plan with our neighbors, and to do training with them in conjunction with the fire department to ensure that everyone in the vicinity understands them.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Is this where I get the? All right, we have a couple of public comments. We got Brad Spencer. Oh. John Franzia.
John Phillips.
Oh, John Phillips. good.
Could you put up the overall site plan, please? If you can look at that. Thank you.
He has his paper down there. When you're done speaking, please turn your paper into Madam Secretary over there.
Oh, okay. This plan right here is good.
Okay.
You have 3 minutes.
I'll be as quickly as I can. Thank you for giving us the opportunity. First of all, with Stan Kinder, when they owned the Sierra Chemical, we had an open relationship with them. We did and worked on evacuation plans, and we did have 2 spills where we had some problems. If you look at the property up there, we're next door, across the street at Silver State, which is 6 acres. We do have military equipment on that. We work on military equipment. On the other side is Peterbilt. And if you look at the back of the property, that's owned by Union Pacific. We lease that from them. So if you go down, you see the black top that we installed down there, that's all part of our property. Now, somebody had brought up the fact, how are you going to get in there? Well, you got to go through the other gate on the other side. The other thing is that we approached Thatcher 2 years ago, and the next person is going to explain it, and we asked for an evacuation plan. It said, and we asked them what they had on the property. They said, we're not going to tell you. So we built the building in 1990. Stan Kinder across the street, Win Logan on the other side, and Pick and Pull. So we all built all that in 1990. One of the other questions I would have, what happens, how are you going to tell us, was there a spill? Do we have monitors that smell the air? That has been brought up. So is there going to be a siren like we had before that tells our employees to get out? When our employees have to evacuate, who's going to pay for their downtime? Stan did. I haven't heard a word from what they're going to do. I have concerns. We also have an electric charging system, 860 volts. Now, I have to tell you, whether you like it or not, EV is here, and it's going to continue. Now, if we have a spark and we're working on these things, what's going to happen if they have something in the air? That's going to blow sky high. I don't have to tell you what happened recently when the batteries, lithium batteries, got hit by a lumber truck. We also saw it in a Truckee. You can't stop the fire. And we are working on these vehicles. I should show you how they look like zoot suits. They look like they're from Mars, to undo these batteries and everything else. That's another concern that I have. But my biggest concern is I'm not receiving any warm fuzzies from Thatcher. We've gone to them. They just say, hey, we're not going to tell you what we want to do. The other thing is, make it quick, behind them, they rent out property to Shinemaster. Now, they're out there grinding and doing a lot of other things. I don't know whether he looked at it. That could fly sparks up. They're doing that every day. Okay? Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Hello, my name, sorry.
Go ahead, you got 3 minutes.
Okay, my name is Taylor Bruce. I'm the Director of Human Resources at Peterbilt Truck Parts and Equipment and Silver State International. My focus has always been on the health and safety of our 160 employees between the 2 dealerships. Thatcher Company backs up to Interstate 80, a high-traffic area for local commuters, and interstate commerce. It is less than 1,000 feet from the Truckee River and our dealerships as well. The impact of a potential chemical spill could be detrimental to our employees, neighboring businesses, and the environment and local wildlife. I am not an environmental activist, and I fully support the growth and expansion of businesses here in Northern Nevada. However, our position is that this expansion poses additional risks to our employees. Thatcher Company has 13 locations across the United States, and in my research, I have found that there have been numerous chemical spills that have resulted in violations and settlements with state agencies and the EPA. The most recent incident was on June 21st in Buckeye, Arizona, where they had a chemical leak of nitric acid requiring local residents and businesses to shelter in place. The Arizona Department of Environmental Quality cited Thatcher Company for multiple violations, including improper storage of hazardous materials. Other EPA investigations resulting in violations and settlements have spanned over the decades and across the country. In March of 2021, we were in the process of updating our safety plan and reached out to Thatcher for information regarding their procedure for alerting neighboring businesses of an emergency. Their response was underwhelming. They told us that the information was public record and that we can find it ourselves. In September of 2023, there was a settlement with Thatcher of Nevada and the EPA stemming from a November 2021 inspection and subsequent investigation for violations of the Clean Air Act, Emergency Planning, and Community Right to Know Act. We ask that you seriously take into consideration the history of safety violations at Thatcher. Our objection to the proposal is strictly the matter of safety risk the additional storage of hazardous materials poses to our employees and the public. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Brad Spencer.
Good evening. I'm on a clock, so we'll have to go fast. First, we appreciate you opening up the forum to us. Second, it's good to hear some of the questions coming back from the Planning Commission. The detail is in there. I've read through quite a bit of the exhibits, and it sparks more questions than I can find answers. So please continue to reach into what's been provided and ask those questions. Those are the questions we need to have. I'll go through my list here as quickly as I possibly can. As reviewing the exhibits, there's indicators, that leans towards property owner's responsibility, and the information appears that Larkin Circle LLC Delaware is the owner. Have we reviewed the lease to see who's actually going to be responsible for anything that happens on that site? So we have Thatcher here representing their project. Are they going to have responsibility, or is it going to be this when an incident occurs? So this one thing I want to bring up. The area neighborhood code is NVAU for Sparks Industrial. And then there's a little corner right there called for NGVV, which is a common area. I don't know if anybody picked up on that or not yet, but that'd be a nice area to further investigate. Exhibits 2, 4, and 7, which were the maps and everything. It kind of looks like we're adding 219,000, well, there's a change in gallonage, so, but I came up 219,300 gallons to the existing 47,350 gallons, taking us to 266,650 gallons of hazardous materials and proposed including existing bulk tanks. Then adding the totes, barrels, and solid hazardous materials as a combination of the build and abilities of a catastrophe. Staff report Exhibit 5, review of October 2003. Good overview of a current similar situation. Exhibit 6, how will history not repeat itself? Safety training, things in place. Exhibit 8, which is the site photos. If you go to page 4 on the left-hand column.
Please try again.
Siri. Sorry, Siri wanted to chime in, apologize. Exhibit 8, the site photos, page 4. On the left-hand side of that picture, it's a picture going outside of their storage area. You can see our business. Our fence line is approximately 60 yards from their fence line. So we are directly east of their site. So we have concerns. Exhibit 9, page labeled 2, third paragraph. Is there a particular reason? My time up?
You can finish your thought.
I got lots of them, though. Paragraph, is there a particular reason why the overall review of the facility design was not performed? It's saying it wasn't needed, but it's another area that could have been performed.
All right.
I got more thoughts. Can I share?
You are?
Okay. One, I think, is there was nowhere in any of these inspections
Yes, sir.
or, pardon?
Please state your name. for
Oh,
the
sorry.
record.
Don Franzia, Bobcat of Reno. Been in the tractor business for 47 years.
Okay.
Thank you. Concerns, there was never, ever any indication to us that there was multi-tenants on the facility. That, to me, concerns is a big safety hazard. Training, I think, should be every day, every week, every year in that facility. Inspections, I feel with them going into it, expanding, should be on a yearly basis until they earn that respect. You got new people, new product, people change, people make mistakes. I've been in the business 47 years and people are always making mistakes. I don't care how good you are, you should have a yearly inspection. And again, like Mr. Phillips said, I'm concerned about insurance, loss of business, what happens to us. Also, sulfuric acid, I have several $1 million of equipment outside, so does John have several $1 million of trucks with the acid on the trucks, acid on the people. What's that gonna do? And the other one I echo with John, how do we know if there's a spill? Nobody knows. But having multi-tenants on that facility, and one thing concerns me too, with all the truck parking in that area, with the new trucks now, with the Tier 4, there's been several fires. And John, I think you can help me on that, but the Tier 4 systems, they've had several truck fires. When you got trucks in the yard idling, the Tier 4 backs up and causes fire. So I echo what John says, and I echo what Brad says. But I'm very concerned. You can't put out lithium batteries. Right, can't.
Is that it?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much, guys.
Do I get the rest of his minute? Had to ask, right?
It's a good ask. So, Scott, can you come up? Oh, okay. Is there any other public comment left for tonight? That already has not.
I got one.
Okay.
Why do we get 3 minutes and they get a half hour?
Public comment, 3 minutes. City code. Any more public comments? All right. We'll move on from that.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple additional things that popped into my head during the public comment that may be helpful for the commission's deliberation here is the applicant did provide some additional or request for additional time for that 2-year expiration date. I will note that the municipal code does allow for an additional year on a conditional use permit if it's requested. It's basically an administrative action if they request it. So it could allow for potentially 3 years, as any other conditional use permit would be. The other thing is certainly you heard the public comment and before the meeting as well too, and this evening from the surrounding businesses. I think it's certainly the expectation of the city that the applicant, if this is approved, that they would remain good neighbors and they would have communication and a working relationship with the surrounding businesses to make sure that in the event of an incident, that public health can be provided for. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any other questions, or I'm at your disposal.
Commissioners, do we have a question for Scott?
Actually, I have a question for Patrick. And I do have a question for Scott. So I got a question for both of them.
Okay.
Chair, could I ask Planner Carey to clarify something on the expiration?
Absolutely. That's a good one, too.
Scott, you said that they can ask for up to 3 years. Does that request come back to the planning commission, or is that a staff approval?
That would be a staff approval.
That they can ask for up to 3 years?
No, it would be an additional year to the 2-year timeline.
And that's can be done by staff?
Yes, that additional year would be granted by staff.
Okay.
So it'd be 3 years total.
So that's not something that,
That's not something
that's
we
not
would do.
something that we could do. That's not something that we could put in here. It would go to you, and you could say, yes, we can grant you that additional year. Is that correct?
Chair.
Is that how it works?
Chair, could I have planning manager Reed come down for a second?
Yes.
I'm confused.
Yeah.
It's an administrative review.
Administrative review.
We don't approve it.
We don't approve it. Okay.
Thank you, Chair Rawson, members of the Planning Commission. For the record, Sienna Reed. In terms of extensions of conditional use permits, those are considered by the body that approves the conditional use permit. So in this instance, that would be City Council as the final decision-making body.
Okay.
So that request would actually come back before City Council. So it would not be administrative, and there would be another public process to consider that request.
Thank you.
Sienna.
Thank you. Okay. All right.
Thank you for the bailout. My apologies, commissioners.
So, a couple of questions that I have. Concerns are lithium batteries. Heard that. How do they put the fire out, sir?
Patrick Chu, Sparks Fire Marshal. That is a very long answer, and I don't know I can give it to you in 2 seconds, but you can't put out lithium battery. That is an absolutely true statement.
Okay.
I've been studying this for a long time. The whole industry and the fire service has been studying this for a long time. I'm not quite sure what they have to do with this facility, but industry in general has been trying to find a way to solve this problem, but that's the reason why I've shown the periodic table. They're two on the opposite ends trying to meet, and if they make contact, it's not good, which is the same as the product in Thatcher.
Okay. So there are no lithium batteries on the site of Thatcher, but the neighbors have them. I get that. I understand that. Safety notifications in the neighborhood. It was mentioned that years ago, I don't know how many years ago, and nobody stated, there was some notification system? Am I
Take a
correct?
stab at that one, Commissioner Kramer. I'm not sure if I can speak to the past incidents. I know from reviewing the meeting minutes from the 2003 special use permit, there were some concerns about the site. Looking through that documentation, I don't know if there was any information about the notification at that time. If you would like for us to beef up any of the conditions of approval to beef up the notification in response to the public comment, happy to take a stab at that.
I'm gonna,
Thatcher might be able to answer that question.
We never received notifications of spill.
oh, okay, well, can,
And the other
oh, okay, sir. Can I,
Let's bring up Thatcher.
Jane Rogers, General Manager, Thatcher. I can't speak specifically to exactly the systems that they had while they were at
Okay.
Sierra, but I've ran chemical plants for a significant amount of time in my life. And previously at this location, there were chlorine and sodium dioxide, or sodium SO2 gas. sodium dioxide, gas filling stations in that location. And the regulations, the federal regulations and the safety regulations around those types of filling mechanisms would require audio and visual alarm systems for chlorine gas releases, right? So I run a plant that does that in California today. Patrick, sorry, I'm just learning everybody's names today, had mentioned, he had put up a graph about, the parts per million in chlorine gas. That's the reason for that. If you're packaging chlorine gas and you lose, containment for chlorine gas, the parts per million can get extreme in that situation. We no longer have any of those operations on this site. We don't fill chlorine gas and we don't fill SO2. So those alarm systems and mechanisms around the regulations for those would not be there at this time. Sodium hypochlorite, which we talked to, does contain chlorine. And so if sodium hypochlorite were to come into contact with sulfuric acid or something that it, a base that it did not, agree with effectively, that are non-compatible, there is a potential for a reaction that would release some chlorine, but in significantly lesser quantities and, in volumes per the parts per million, because there's not as much chlorine in that liquid. So that's what I think that's where they're talking about. I can't say for 100% sure what they were talking about with the alarms and the notification systems in the past, but that would make sense for me in terms of that. You wouldn't put a chlorine filling system in place unless you had those regulations, those safety alarms and mechanisms in place, right?
I think one of the questions they had regarding that was, how do they know if there's going to be a spill there?
Right.
So if you have a spill or a leak, what's going to notify them and their employees to stay in place, leave,
Right.
what?
Well, so
Is there somebody going to be running down the street screaming and going, oh my God,
Well, I think it depends on what the level of the spill
Right.
is, right? In terms of what we've put up, we've got the dikes and the systems and the control mechanisms. If you have a chemical that is homogeneous to the containment system and there's some type of leak from that tank that goes into the containment system, it has not left secondary containment. There's not a spill. There's not a danger to anybody in the neighborhood. There would not be necessarily an external notification to everybody to disrupt their business, because this, and based on the studies from the engineers and the chemical engineers, et cetera, who do these things, told us that there would be a significant potential for some type of cloud or gas that would release that would cause that problem. We would then install some type of alarm system to alarm us of the parts per million quantities that being significant enough to, leave the property and endanger the public.
I think,
You have more questions?
well, I think what neighbors want to know who pays for the downtime. I mean, if there's a significant spill or a significant incident where they are closed for a significant amount of time, I'm going to assume that is obviously
So
the way I read and what I have read is it's a court action, and they take you to court and they sue you because it's loss of their business.
Right, so Thatcher is fully insured for this type of stuff, right?
Okay.
Liability damage, et cetera, right? And so, we'll tell you the exact threshold for what that was, because this is based on per incident, per site. If there's something happened that we were to impact a loss of business, those claims would have to be submitted, and then we would determine, what the damages were, and that's what that was for. We are completely, fully insured for that.
Okay, and the other thing that I'm hearing is they want you to be a good neighbor, and I think that I'm hearing that the good neighbor part hasn't quite been there yet, and I think that good neighbor relations is probably they're afraid, they're scared, and good neighbor is a good thing to be. In the business that you're in, being a good neighbor is a good thing to be.
Clearly. So I've just met, I met some of the gentlemen outside before this. And probably not 100% the correct thing here. I've only been with Thatcher for 6 months, but I have 20 years in the chemical industry. We have new management. We've put new management into that facility, and it is entirely our intent to be a good neighbor. We have no interest in our neighbors being afraid or concerned that we're not doing our job correctly or that we're endangering their their employees or anybody in the community. It is not for us to, nobody goes into the chemical industry to hurt people or to damage the environment. It is not our goal, right? So, and it says clearly, I can understand with someone who has 20 years of, here and hadn't had that in the past. All we can say is it is our complete intent moving forward to have a very positive relationship with our neighbors.
Back to Scott.
Well, one quick thing, I want to encourage you to have a good relationship with your
Yes.
neighbors and open up the door and dialogue with them, educate them, and make sure they understand what you guys are completely doing.
Absolutely.
And on that, we did have our branch manager reach out, and I will say here in public that they're welcome to come. I would happily give them a tour of the facility, show them what we're doing, explain to them what we have on site. There are some serious, some of the DHS type of Homeland Security, we can't be explaining
Sure.
to the world, exactly what the chemicals are and what they do, because there are some safety and security protocol around that you don't want to let everybody in the public know that. But we do not mind inviting them over and sharing what we're doing.
All right, thank you. Wait, one more. Commissioner Elkins has a
Yeah,
question.
before we move the seats, first of all, thank you for being here. And so I just want to make sure that I understood that there are currently no chemicals unless mixed that would release a dangerous plume.
So let me say that I would want to have my chemical engineers to do a complete analysis of every chemical that we have on site to give you a final, comprehensive statement on that. We do have some chemicals. We do have ammonia gas well below the threshold
That's
quantities
what I
on
thought I
site.
saw, yeah.
Right, and so it would, if one of those cylinders were to fail, right, they would release ammonia, right? Whether or not that plume would be big enough in any parts per million or concentrate to get outside of the facility, I would prefer that the chemical engineers and the regulators around that who do the math and the studies around that would give us a true statement. And that being in the conditions is completely appropriate for this, that we would say, okay, this is what, we'll do. There is also the option that we may not bring ammonia gas into the site anymore based on business, based on what the conditions are and whether or not it's appropriate to have on site.
And then to follow-up question, the plume analysis, is that constant monitoring, or how does that work?
So the plume analysis is looking at what you get, a plume is essentially when you get vapor or an air plume up in the air. So you're looking at the potential, what's the worst case for what we have on site for a different plume. And you also look at what's the potential for how far it can travel, what's the impact area. And that's what that encompasses. So you can see exactly what the impact area is, what the concentrations the concentration's gonna reduce as it travels. So that's all part of that, so you can see what the impact area is. And that will help you make a determination on, on what safety procedures and protocols and engineering controls need to be in place to protect against.
So it's not like a constantly monitoring sensor? It's a regular type of inspection?
A plume analysis is purely a mathematical and
Okay. that's what I
it's an
thought.
evaluation of potential scenarios.
Okay, that's what I thought. Thank you.
What I would just add is, based on that plume analysis, if there was a significant amount based on what that analysis was, and it would indicate that there would need to be constant monitoring, we would follow those recommendations.
Okay, I
Right.
get it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions for Scott, Marilyn?
I don't have a question. I think I
I don't have a question for Scott, but I did want to bring up Patrick for a question. You're just gonna bounce up and down.
You're getting your steps in.
Getting my steps in.
I just had one question regarding some of the recommendations for the third-party inspections. There was talk of adding that as a condition every 3 years. Are you in agreement with every 3 years? Or would you recommend more often? Because I didn't really get a clear idea that it was going to be every 3 years, other than what was set up here.
Well, in most state organization that do inspections on facilities like this in other states and other organizations that are enforcement, it's generally every 3 years.
Okay, I just wanted to be clear on that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I want to add one thing.
Leave your
Yeah,
seat.
that's okay. I want to add on this plume analysis, though. It's very complicated, and it's more complicated here because, as we know, we get the afternoon winds, right? And it's sometimes you want that wind because you want to dilute the smoke as quick as you can. But if it's traveling really slow, it's that's when it gets a little concerned. But you can see it. Just don't go in it. So it is very complicated, and it's just a study.
Right, and. Thank you. And that's what I thought it was an analysis, a study of what could happen or how far it would spread, how quickly, depending on the concentration. My concern was more, if there is a release, that, are we constantly monitoring? Is there some sort of sensor or that can be in place to monitor, to make sure, or are these gases, it's been a long time since I've been in chemistry, are these gases, where you can see them, they're heavier so they don't move quickly, they're not invisible, where people are going to be overcome, Thatcher's own staff first, if there's an accidental release?
Well, chlorine gas, depending on the wind, and it will travel, and I believe it's, Derek's probably can answer this better than I can. I'm not sure if it's heavier than air, but the incidents that I've seen, it does travel, so I assume it's heavier than air. But you definitely don't want to inhale some of that stuff because it's not good.
They don't have chlorine, she said. They're not carrying chlorine.
Excuse me?
They're not carrying chlorine, but they are carrying ammonia.
Well, a suggestion is if you go to the chlorineinstitute.org, you can get a whole bunch of information out of there. And I have one here, and some of the chemicals they have on site. Granted, this is, of 1 in a million if it does happen, but some of those chemicals, if they interact with each other, does create chlorine gas. Yes.
Thank you. Okay. Commissioners, do you have any more questions?
A quick one for Scott. I guess it's not totally clear to everyone. Is Thatcher required to share the evacuation plans and emergency plans with their neighbors in this text, or is it? I guess just I've heard the concern a couple times that the plans haven't been shared in the past. And I guess I'm wondering if the verbiage says that they're required to share the plans.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Sperber. For the record, Scott Carey. I think that requirement that they share that information and the safety and training would be covered in condition number 8 to that effect.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, any more? City Attorney Brandon? John he's raising his hand back there.
Discussion.
All right, thank you, guys. I want to make sure we get this right.
Mm-hmm.
John, you can come up.
Potentially, Chair, you'd want to reopen the public hearing.
All right, I'm going to reopen public comment on this. State your name.
My name is John Phillips. Two things. The property is not owned by Thatcher. And subsequently, they could subdivide it, which they've done. Could we get a letter from the property owner that they understand what they're doing and possible liability? That's number one. Because could I get a copy of their insurance policy that says that they will take care of our employees in case they're out for a day or a week? Just want a copy of the insurance policy so I can give it to our attorneys.
That's our purview.
Pardon me?
I don't think that's our purview.
Okay.
That's a good question.
How would I have our attorneys write to you to get
How's
the
that?
information? I don't know how it works.
I agree, Mr. Chair. I don't think the planning commission would really get into insurance coverage, but I will note, and Scott, correct me if I'm wrong on this application, for any entitlement like this, you have to get an owner's affidavit from the owner of the property indicating that they are aware of and authorize the tenant, in this case Thatcher's application.
So is that something we put into the condition?
Chair.
No, it's just, it was part of the application
Okay.
packet, the owner's affidavit.
Chair, the owner has identified that they're okay with this coming forward by a signed affidavit.
Okay.
That's notarized.
So the owner has signed an affidavit that owns the property? Okay. And we can't get a copy of the insurance policy?
That's out of our purview. I can't
Okay, that's
force
fine. I
anybody to
just wanna
do
know.
that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Commissioners, any more discussion on this?
Chair, potentially you may have additional public comment, because right now public comment is
All
open.
right. All right, come on down. You got 3 minutes.
Thank you. Again, Brad Spencer, Bobcat of Reno. 60-yard neighbor. A few other things as I'm listening here is brought up that this site is national security on it, potential. But then again, we have sublet businesses within that area. Concern there, how's that being handled? Also, there's a banner on their fence right off of Larkin Circle, a big banner saying, "Space available, call this number." And I took that picture today. These tanks, are they single wall tanks? If you're on I-80, what will a 50 caliber do when it starts going through those tanks? You know, what is the structure of these tanks? Are they going to withstand national security standards? Or are they just standard bulk tanks that are going to have capabilities to contain a material? Going into that area, there's a bottleneck right there at Greg Street and Larkin Circle. It's one way into that area, one way out of that area. If everybody's trying to escape that and the fire department's trying to get in, it's going to be a mishmash. There's only one way into that area and one way out. So that brings up, the other part. Fire Marshal Chu brought up the green smoke. Yeah, we're going to run. That's where, but we're all running through this bottleneck trying to get away from it, or down to the river and I guess float down the river to get to a safe area. The inevitable, as presented earlier, there's been other occurrences at other sites of Thatcher. We don't want it in our neighborhood. The duration of the project, I've heard that phrase quite a bit in here. So the project is, a 3-year project. Well, in 3 years, if they really wanted to get after it, they could put all of these tanks in approximately 6 months. If they got the right contractors lined up and everything else, the only objective would be weather, would be their permitting factor. But they could rock and roll and actually get this 230,000 gallons of tanks in there. And the permit is going for all of these tanks right here, right now. We hear that we're just only be able to get 2 in, and, we'll have to come back. But you're taking the option here to approve 230,000 gallons at this one time. So differentiation on what's going on. The site closes, fails, expires. What is the remediation procedure for this area? if it just doesn't work out, Thatcher decides, hey, our lease is up, we're leaving in 4 years, are we going to be stuck there with all these empty tanks trying to do something else with it? What's the long term if this doesn't work out? I'll actually cut short here. Thank you very much for your time. The information is there. Please keep digging.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Patrick, can you guys come back up?
The
General manager.
lady, yeah, yeah, you do.
Chair, remember you have the public comment.
Oh, excuse me. Go ahead and sit down. I'm going to close public comment right at this time.
Thank you for coming back up. And so I had written down, you had indicated that DHS has some sort of regulatory issues over your facilities?
Yeah, so depending on what chemicals you have on site,
Mhm.
right, there are chemicals that are considered chemical of interest. And those chemicals, you know, if you have those on site, those have to be maintained in an inventory. You have to keep track of those chemicals, and you don't share those chemicals on site, right? And so if we had those chemicals on site, clearly we don't walk through and say, hey, this is what this chemical is, and that's what that chemical, we wouldn't disclose that to our neighbors based on those chemicals, right? Because those are homeland security chemicals. I would have to go back through the inventory on here, but those chemicals, if they're chemicals of interest, they're kept in cages and locked. They have additional levels of security on those specific chemicals in those instances if they were there.
So the other tenants that share your space don't have...
They don't have access. They don't have access to that area. There's gates in between the
Chair,
two sides.
could you speak into the microphone? I don't think that
sorry.
people can
Yeah,
hear
you've
you.
got a very
I've
soft voice.
I've constantly been told that I'm very soft-spoken. I apologize.
Yeah.
There's a gate in between the facilities, and there are locked gates in between
Okay.
that. So we secure our materials are secured within gates and behind fences and whatnot, so that people, just the random person or someone from another facility can't come into our site and mess with our chemicals, right? And I would note that the immediate vendor that is also in that same facility is an environmental service response company. So that's what they do. They respond to hazardous material incidents. So, I mean, if you have a neighbor and you're worried about hazmat response, these are the people to have as your neighbor.
Well, that's good. Okay, and so I misunderstood because earlier I thought you said that there was access to your side of the property, not through the warehouse, but on the grounds with the
Yeah.
other tenants.
So the perimeter fence, right, goes around our site, the neighbor within the building, and then the neighbor that they explained that does truck repair. They're all within that. We don't have a fence that locks the exterior, the tanks themselves between those tenants. That is a fact, right? Those tenants are within the yard and could walk over to where those tanks are.
They can.
Yes, they can. And where the rail is as well.
Okay, but the chemicals that are controlled by DHS regulations are secure?
They wouldn't be inside those tanks. Those are not.
Or
We have warehouse and buildings that are locked when we are not there and fully secured.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Commissioners, any more questions? Are we all good? Do we need to discuss any more? All right. I'll entertain a motion.
Did we finalize
I
the,
think
that we
this-
wanted to add
we
the
wanna add the
third party?
The third
Yeah.
party.
Yes.
Yeah, add the third party independent inspection every 3 years, I think.
Yeah.
Can we add that an extension wouldn't go before the city?
That was city council.
Goes to council.
But my question was, can we say that unless there's a third party approval, that they cannot apply for an extension with the city council?
It's gonna be what,
Convoluted.
yeah, and also it's an administrative review.
Okay.
So
Okay,
that wouldn't come to us, it comes to the city council.
okay.
So
But we wanna add
we want to add that
third
third
party
party
inspection.
independent inspection under addition 6, is that correct, Scott?
And maybe if I could get the overhead, I can take a stab at maybe incorporating some language. Had some thoughts. Condition.
As Planner Carey is looking at that, I just wanted to remind the Planning Commission that it would be, amended motion would be made by one of the commissioners. They would request it in their motion. It would be seconded, then the Planning Commission would discuss the amended motion.
Okay.
6B, submit a site procedure and policy that allows for routine safety inspections and an additional third-party safety review to the approval of the fire marshal.
It's not a name.
Do we want to add every 3 years?
Every 3 years.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
please.
Yeah, every 3 years. So amend that.
And Commissioner Kramer, if I may, I think you earlier in the comments, this is certainly for discussion by the commission, but sounded like there seemed to be an interest in maybe adding a regular inspection requirement by the Sparks Fire Department of the site.
Don't they do that every year?
Come on up.
You do that every year, don't you? You do a regular fire inspection, right?
Yes.
I mean, I'm assuming that's
Yeah,
what you do.
yeah, we've been doing it every year
Do a
for many
regular
years.
fire inspection, so
Regular-
you
yes.
check for fire stuff.
Yes.
Make sure their alarms work and the smoke alarms and, you know, all the lights are, the exits and all of that. That's just a normal thing, right?
Yes.
So we don't need to put that in, I mean, we don't need to put that in there. I mean, that's
already done.
It's already done anyways, right?
Yes.
Okay. I was just curious about I mean, that was just a fire inspection. That's a fire thing. This is a different thing. This is by a different party. Fire department always does their job, right?
Thank you.
In the motion,
So in the motion, we just say this and then add that, right?
add that.
Right? Is that correct, Mr. City Planner,
Assistant city planner.
Mr. Planner person?
Assistant to the city planner or something.
Assistant, Mr. Sir?
The Planning Commission may want to consider, I believe that Mr. Carey provided or proposed some amended conditions in his initial presentation for the consideration of the Planning Commission. And now you're asking for some additional changes to what was originally presented. So not only will you may ask for the motion to be amended in 6B, but there was also some proposals from staff at the beginning of the hearing to amend
6E as well.
6E and 7F.
Oh, we have to approve those,
Okay.
the formatting.
Right, okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And potentially, for, if the planning commission was comfortable, you could say as outlined in the amended conditions in 6E, 6,
And then
Seven.
7F, yes, thank you.
And then the addition of 6 and the addition of 6B, right?
What's 7F? Yeah.
Got it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I think I got it.
We've been working on this while you've been discussing, and this is what
Wow.
I have that you may
Oh,
want to
look at
consider.
that. Wow. Okay. I'll take a
love
stab.
All right, so are we ready to go to
I'm ready.
motion?
I'm ready.
All right.
I'll move. Okay, here we go. I move to forward to City Council a recommendation to approve conditional use permit PCN 03061/CU 24-0010, a request to amend a previously approved special use permit PCN 03061 to allow, can I take out the second
Yeah.
to allow, for outdoor storage and the construction of up to 10 additional tanks for the distribution, manufacturing, and storage of hazardous materials on a 5.03 acre site located at 2302 Larkin Circle, based on findings C1 through C5 and the findings set forth in our NRS 278.147.4B, and the facts supporting these findings as set forth in the staff report, and subject to the 13 conditions of approval as listed in the staff report, with modifications to the 6B and E and 7F, and the Planning Commission meeting, at the Planning Commission meeting on Thursday, September 19, 2024. Wow.
Second.
That is a lot of words.
A lot. All right, we got a motion by Commissioner Kramer and a second by Commissioner Pritzo.
Man.
Please. Pardon me? Oh, any further discussions?
Holy man, I hope not.
All right, let's vote. All right, the motion is approved unanimously.
Thank you. I would just like,
Commissioner Sperber, would you do a voice vote?
Would love to, aye.
Aye.
I would like to thank everybody for their time,
Yeah.
their concerns. Please note, I took all of that into consideration. I appreciate your coming out tonight. This was a much longer meeting than we normally have. Ask Commissioner Rawson, he's normally the 10-minute guy. And I appreciate all the information and all the work that staff has done on all of this to keep us all informed on everything. And I do hope, I'm going to put this on the record, that everybody can be a good neighbor over there. So thank you all. I appreciate it.
Chair,
Thank you.
can I add a word? Thank you, Chair. I just want to remind the public through you, Chair, that this today, as your motion reflected, is a recommendation to the Sparks City Council. And so there will be another opportunity for the public to have their concerns heard by the Sparks City Council. And if they'd like further information on when that meeting would be, they can grab Planner Carey out in the hallway.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good job, Mike.
All right, so we'll move on to.
We haven't done yet.
Pardon me? No. Any announcements?
Is this staff announcements?
Oh, no.
10.1 first.
10.1. Oh,
Where are we?
Another one.
another one.
Regular public comment now.
Just stall a little bit.
I'm gonna stall a little.
Yes.
Let them get out the door.
Good call, Mr. Chair.
Hard one.
All right, I open this up to public comment. Does anybody have a public comment? I see none. I close public comment. Staff announcements?
Thank you, Chair. I have one. On, today is Thursday, so 7 days from now, Thursday, whatever date that is, at 11 o'clock, where we host study session, we're going to do a lunch for John Erickson. If any of you would like to attend, you're welcome to attend. It's essentially his last day, so that will be his going away lunch or retirement lunch or whatever it's called. But you're all welcome to attend.
Thank you.
What day is that again?
Thursday, 7 days from today,
Next week, okay.
the 26th.
Next Thursday. Commissioners, do you have any comments or announcements?
I do. Good job, Commissioner Rawson. Great meeting.
You finally had one.
It went well.
Good
All right.
job. You kept it under control.
I did. Meeting adjourned.
Wow.